Hi, everyone. I'm Susan Regan, and I am a seasoned couple therapist, an expert co-parenting counselor, and a certified mediator. So when I do co-parenting therapy and mediation, I use all of my skill sets. So some of what I do is work with folks who are at the very beginning process of going through or wanting to go through a separation. Sometimes we spend a lot of time just working on the relationship or the ending relationship and trying to figure out how there can be a plan, how we can deal with whatever is going on in the family and kind of create a really good timeline for the children, understanding some of the children temperaments and what some of their symptoms might be. And this is so important because this way parents are setting up how to change their family system and also consider how it might impact their kids so that it can be a transition, not a trauma. So, a lot of times I'm in discussion with people about what parts of their relationship didn't work out so well because oftentimes when you're in a long-term marriage or a committed relationship where you're raising a family, that those dynamics can easily just go into the next phase of your relationship, which might be you being separated from that person or living separately from them. Also, it's so important to remember that relationships with such commitments and such levels and layers don't end in a day, because it takes a while to really work out of a relationship that you've been a couple relationship with. Now you're changing it into just being a parenting relationship. So that takes some time. So I actually meet people right where they're at when they come into my sessions. And I do that by meeting each individual first. So I get a connection and understand the history from their point of view. A lot of times when people come into co-parenting therapy, and slash mediation. And I say slash mediation because I use both my skill sets alternatingly as I see fit, tailoring it to the needs of that particular family unit. So, for example, when people come into my sessions, I meet them both individually so I can really understand their point of view and their priorities about what they really want to talk about in our co parenting sessions. Then we schedule sessions all together, prioritizing some of the subjects that each party has brought up and what is like most important to address right away. So what we prioritize. Then we stay on track with the prioritization of these topics. And sometimes what we'll do is finish a bunch of topics and not see each other for a little bit until the next set of topics that need to be discussed and decided on come up. So a lot of times people might, like a typical scenario would be people come in to see me and they're first really addressing, do they want to separate and what's the best way to do that? And a lot of parents are concerned that they're going to cause damage to their kids, so they want to measure it out. And it takes a while sometimes to find like the right time to separate when you're in a family. It could be after a holiday or after a school year or after some kind of event that's happened in the family. So there's a measure of the timeline. And even when we know what the timeline is, it's important to get some support because tensions can rise during that time. So I really want to make sure that people are getting the support, and sometimes separation starts before we actually do it. So there's more like separation of schedules. People are like in the house or out of the house, but not in the house together. There might be some overlap times, but not a lot of overlap times. And that's actually kind of helpful for kids because they've already gotten used to the parents or the family's not together all the time. Um, and that's also sometimes really helpful because sometimes there's a lot of tension that's going on between the couple when they're changing into another dimension of their relationship. And so it can be helpful just to give space to that. So after that type of situation, we would go into just I would work on whatever seems to come up in the family at the rate and pace that the family's going. So that's one scenario. Another scenario with co-parenting is that I might see a family later, a lot later, maybe a year after they've separated. And the reason why the parents are coming to me is they either A, are having a really hard time with some of the symptoms of the kids. And maybe the kids are having a hard time during transition, or they don't want to be at one person's house versus the other. Or there might be a major change happening in the family, like someone is getting into a more serious relationship, or there's a move or a job loss, or something like that. So that would be a time where the parents are really needing some support to try to figure out things, to create some decisions that they can actually follow through with and agree on, and that there's some accountability in the system. So that's another scenario that I see. And most typically, when I've been working with people from the beginning, then that gives me a lot of information about their history. And so people can come back anytime when there's any major life event that's going on in their families, so they can get support and guidance. And so I tell people, as long as one of you requests a meeting, both parties should show up. And I make the decision on whether that's a trivial thing that the meeting is being called for or not. Sometimes people have a hard time healing or moving on, so they might want to have more co-parenting meetings than needed. And sometimes one party is just minimizing the need to have conversation because they really just want to do what I call, which is a pretty common term, parallel parenting. And that means that each party doesn't like actively parent together or check in with each other or fill each other in about how the kids are doing. So they just are like, whatever happens in this parent's house is this parent's business. Whatever happens in that parent's house is that parent's business. We don't talk a lot about it. We don't have like basic routines that are followed in each household. But that's totally fine, because sometimes you just want to get the tension between the parents to go away from the child. But sometimes that's not reasonable either, because parents still have to talk about major things like schools and events and activities that kids are going to sign up to, and what's emotionally happening with the child from time to time. So I also think, yes, parallel parenting can be good, but there still needs to be some communication. And it's not unusual that people might find me in the midst of that communication, because I might be the center person that both parties talk to. And then I make decisions and kind of inform everyone of what the changes are, or what needs to happen, or what commitments are. So, so I really work towards what's the need of the couple turning into parents, and how can I maintain health in the family going forward. So there's the therapy part, which is I try to help and educate people about how to handle certain feelings, certain life stages that are going on in families, developmental stages that are going on with kids, and how to work with blended family themes. So that's a lot of what I do in the therapy world. In the mediation world, I do things like write addendums to custody agreements, so that if things change in a family, I might write those down so people can file those with their original settlement docs. And that way their parenting agreement is up to date. And I will write the initial parenting agreement, which is a parent settlement agreement, which is a whole year's worth of like a schedule, how the parents manage finances, activities, schools, seeing relatives, family, summer vacations, things like that, holidays. And so there's a whole year worth of directives that are written in the parent settlement agreement. And basically, once you do that, the courts really never want to see you again. So I would just write the addendum to those agreements as the family changes and grows organically, as it will. So I hope I answered your questions about my co-parenting and mediation. It's work that I think is incredibly valuable. The parents that come and see me are actually really trying to make this a transition, not a trauma. And they really need to, at times, do their own work about some of their own grief that might come up during the process. I hope you found my introduction helpful, and don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions.